What is up, Pacer Nation? Welcome to the Pacer Pulse podcast, the heartbeat of Indiana basketball.
Welcome, welcome.
And today, guys, I wanted to go over some news that was reported yesterday, I think it was, by Shams Charania, where he reported that currently the Indiana Pacers are in trade discussions, I would say, or at least not in advanced talks, but they're in trade discussions to try to find the starting center for the future. So I thought that was very telling. Of course, we all kind of knew this and expected this. We knew that Jay Huff, Isaiah Jackson, Tony Bradley aren't the answers for the long-term starting center position. And no knock against those guys. Jay Huff has actually been playing very well lately. But I think we all would agree that each of those guys are probably better as backup centers. So it doesn't come as a surprise that we would be interested in trying to fill that void at the center spot. And they actually mentioned a couple names that were in other reports too. And I know one was reported by Jake Fisher, so he's definitely, I would say, a pretty credible source. But he was saying how that we may have interest in Daniel Gafford for the Dallas Mavericks, and that is a very intriguing fit to me. And with these scenarios too, I'm gonna break down some trade scenarios and how we can maybe make a trade happen for both these players I'm gonna mention. And then another report was about Walker Kessler. I know that's an exciting name for most Pacer fans that follow the team pretty closely, and I get it. I mean, he's a younger player. He's shown a lot of potential at the center spot, and before he got hurt this year, so he's out for the year with a torn labrum, basically the same injury that Mathurin had. So this is going to be a guy, if we do trade for Walker Kessler, he's out for the entire year. And also another caveat that people might not know is he's going to be a restricted free agent. Walker Kessler will be. So you're going to be trading for him knowing that he's going to be a restricted free agent. Maybe you trade for him with somewhat of an idea already in place to re-sign him, and maybe you can get him on an even cheaper deal since he is going to be out for the full year. So I can see where that makes sense too. But also the Daniel Gafford deal would make a ton of sense to me, and I'll dive into why that's the case too when I go to break down these trades that I've kind of created for both these guys. But very interesting news, and I think that one thing to keep an eye on, I'm going to say, is I think it is December 15th is when Isaiah Jackson can be traded. So he's making around like $8 million a year for like the next 3 years it's going to be. So that is definitely an interesting trade asset, I would say. He's still a younger big, maybe has some untapped potential. And coming off the Achilles, maybe a team would be convinced that they can turn him into something. He's not a bad backup center either, so a team might value him in that way as well. But I think, yeah, starting December 15th, we should be able to use his contract in trade talks, which is going to be a huge element to this. And I'll get into that reason why during one of these trades, at least, that I try to piece together. But I would keep an eye on that. And like I said, it's very difficult, especially with the Walker Kessler one, because he is contract extension eligible. And how is that going to really fit in terms of us trying to pay him and then trying to bring in or try to re-sign Mathurin too, because he's up for a contract extension? It would be very interesting to see, because are we going to try to sign both these guys? What kind of salary would have to go back in return to the Jazz to trade for a Walker Kessler, because he's only making like $4 million right now, but like I said, you're going to have to extend him. So very interesting, and I'm not surprised at all that it's been reported, but I think the biggest thing was that it was reported by Shams. So it looks like we're already trying to be aggressive on maybe in the next few weeks. I mean, maybe a trade's not imminent or anything like that, but it's very interesting to see that we're already exploring trade scenarios, it sounds like. So maybe we're looking to make a deal sooner rather than later, and maybe that signals we're trying to win still. But then again, it depends on which player we're actually trade for, because if we trade for Walker Kessler, then obviously he's out for the year, and we're just going to have him ramped up and ready to go once Tyrese is back next year. So enough of that spill. Let me get into some of these trade scenarios that I cooked up on Fanspo, the trade machine. And if you guys haven't used that, it's very fun to use. especially if you're into like trades and different things like that. I'm very heavily into that. I think it's fun to do. So let me break down some of these trade scenarios I created because I'm trying to paint kind of a picture of what it would take to trade for both of these guys, salary wise, maybe asset wise, what it would take. And I don't even have the perfect picture on this, but this is just in my opinion, probably what each of these teams would be looking for, I would say. So to start off with Walker Kessler, I know it's the sexier name that people are probably going to be more into. So I'm gonna start off with him in this one trade scenario. Pacer fans are gonna probably want to crucify me for this one, but I have us sending Andrew Nembhard to the Utah Jazz, and I have us receiving Walker Kessler and Georges Niang. So let me explain this. So nobody tries to tear me to shreds on this. So let me explain. People obviously try to say that Ben Mathurin is our biggest trade chip. And I get their argument because he is up for a contract extension. We haven't reached that yet with him. But like we've seen with other restricted free agents so far, especially from this past season, like a Giddey, like a Kuminga, and some other guys, I know there's a few others. A lot of those guys that were restricted free agents, I mean, it lasted quite into the summer. It's not like teams are rushing to extend these guys right away. I think that they're waiting to see what the market kind of is for these guys. And I think it's just smarter for both sides, for the player and the team, to just kind of wait it out. So I don't think us not signing Mather into an extension already is any implication that we don't want to bring him back. I don't think that's it at all. And honestly, it could have been Matherin that just as well wanted to bet on himself. So I get it. People think, oh, we already got Nembhard locked into a long-term contract. Neesmith now, top end, whatever guys that are already signed. But I think what people are missing too is that makes some of these guys that much more tradable. Like just because we have these guys under contract means that they are more tradable. And I get like Neesmith probably isn't right now because we just re-signed him and he's got like a trade kicker and all that. But this is where my argument comes in for trading Andrew Nembhard, especially over a guy like Matherin, let's say. Because Nembhard's already under contract. So let's say you're the Jazz and you don't want to commit a lot of money for the next 4 years. If you want to re-sign Matherin, it might take 25 to 30 million. Maybe you don't see him as like a clean of a fit as a Nembhard would be for their team. So they already have Ace Bailey at the small forward spot. They have Bryce Sensabaugh. They kind of have guys already that kind of fill that Matherin role. So I just, as much potential and like star potential I think Matherin has, I don't see like why they would necessarily covet him over, let's say, an Andrew Nembhard, who I think would actually fit very well with their team. He could be the lead guard. I know they have Keontae George, but I think he's more of a combo guard in my opinion. And I think he needs a solid defender next to him as well. So even like a Keontae George Nembhard backcourt could kind of simulate what we do here in Indiana somewhat with Tyrese and Nembhard, where Nembhard could cover up a lot of George's deficiencies on defense and give him another playmaker in the backcourt because he could start even at the 2, let's say, Nembhard in Utah. And I could see where that would appeal to them a lot more than Matherin. And maybe why they were hesitant to like pay Walker too is they don't want to commit a bunch of cap. I don't even know what his number would be. But again, this is another caveat where I say, well, let's say like Walker Kessler may only command 18 to 20 million per year on an extension. Well, Nembhard's making 18 million per year for the next 3 years. So that's a very team-friendly deal, and that would obviously be very attractive to a team like Utah, who maybe they don't want to commit a lot of salary to, let's say a Matherin, who would make 25 to 30 million possibly. And if we could bring in a Walker Kessler for basically the same amount of money, and then you're basically not really giving up much cap space. I mean, maybe an extra million or two if we re-sign Kessler and give up Nembhard. But if they can make around the same amount of money, that still leaves us room to be able to re-sign Matherin. Yes, we would go into the tax, so maybe we would make another move to kind of get under that. I don't know. But it would still leave that door open for us to re-sign Matherin. So if you guys kind of follow what I'm saying here, is like, why would this not make more sense for us to trade Nembhard? I get it, how awesome he's been for us, and he just came off an awesome game against the Kings, and he was pivotal for us in the playoffs and the finals run. And like I said, I'm not even advocating for him to get traded or Matherin to get traded. I'm just saying, I think fans need to kind of open up their minds a little bit. Just because guys are under long-term contracts doesn't mean they're not going to be traded. It just means you're retaining an asset and getting them for a good market price that other teams are going to value probably just as much, of course. Like, what teams would not want that too? So let's throw away that argument that these guys are locked into long-term deals. That don't matter. That this means that they're more tradable, if anything. So I just want to get that out of the way. And then Georges Niang, obviously we know he's a longtime best friend of Tyrese Halliburton, and he's on an expiring deal. So you basically get off his contract after this year, anyways. He gives you a little more depth going for the rest of this year, I guess, if we need it. And yeah, I mean, maybe if we bring him back on a minimum deal, if we can next year, cool. But honestly, I just threw him in because to match salaries and to basically have a guy that's on an expiring deal. So that's what like really intrigued me about this possible scenario. Because if we can just sign Kessler for close to the same amount of money as what Nembhard's making, that makes it that much easier to just re-sign Matherin. Then you could have a lineup of Tyrese, Matherin, Neesmith, Siakam, and Walker Kessler. And then you got Obi Toppin off the bench. You got TJ McConnell. You got a top three pick or even a top 7 pick that you can bring off the bench too and develop. You could even still trade Jarris and like Shepard, or you have other deals that you can make even too in this scenario to help bolster this team wherever we would need it. That's what really fascinated me about this trade. And I think it's one you got to heavily consider if you're the Pacers, because I know it would hurt so bad giving up Nembhard, but maybe he would want his own team to run as well. You never know what guys like what their motivations are. And I don't know. I mean, I know he's a good fit or whatever guys want to say, but Matherin has also improved on the defensive end this year. Granted, obviously not Nembhard level, but he's not such a negative on that end now where it's going to completely destroy our defense if, let's say, we swap Matherin for Nembhard in the starting 2-guard spot, you know? And especially if we're bringing in Walker Kessler, the paint defense is going to improve dramatically. You got Matherin and Neesmith on the wing. Siakam's an elite defender too. And, you know, Halliburton's had his improvements, but I just think that sounded very appealing. Sorry to go on a big spiel with that, but I just think people should keep their minds open. Would I do this trade? I'm not saying I would or wouldn't, but I think if you're the front office and if you're really that serious about making this big of an upgrade at the center spot, you have to highly consider it. And then the other trade I did involving Walker Kessler was just, I did it for the sake of the exercise. It was a Matherin for Walker Kessler swap, straight up, and that works too. But then again, it's basically just, you're trading, I don't want to say like problems, but you're trading which guy would you rather extend, essentially, I guess. And so if the Jazz thought it was more likely that they would want to extend a player like Matherin over a Walker Kessler, and if both teams feel satisfied that like, hey, this fits both like what we need to, then you could just do a straight up swap, I guess, and that would work. Like I said, I don't see the fit with the Jazz in terms of Ben Matherin on that team. They already have like an Ace Bailey who's kind of a score first guy. I just don't see the fit. I don't think it's that clean for them. And for us, I mean, yeah, it would help get Walker Kessler, but when we really go down the line here, we saw how bad our scoring was with Matherin out. I mean, he's really the only other guy besides Siakam that created his own shots. And granted, I know Halliburton's an amazing offensive player who can create for others, but what if Halliburton goes down? Like, especially for huge parts of the season, you just never know. And what if he doesn't come back 100%? Excuse me. I just think that's something to keep in mind because you just never know how guys are going to heal. And I just think Matherin's proven his importance more and more. So I'd be very surprised at this kind of deal. And like I said, I would love to get Walker Kessler on this team. I would not be upset by it, but I also wonder about his fit potentially as well, where, see, the lineups have to make kind of sense, right? Yes, he's a great young big man. He's got potential to improve even more. If he can improve his jump shot even more, that would be huge from 3. And he's a great inside presence. Like, we need his shot blocking, his rebounding. He would help transform the defense on that end, especially the paint defense, I know, would be a huge boost because it's so bad right now already. We give up so many points in the paint. I would love it, personally, but it would have to be for the right deal. And it just is a lot more trickier trying to trade for Walker Kessler than I would say even a Daniel Gafford, who I think kind of makes more sense for this team, and I'll explain that too whenever I start getting to those trade scenarios. But I just don't see a Mathurin for Walker swap making a lot of sense for honestly both teams, I would say. So I think it made more sense with the Nimhard trade personally. But then again, I'm not rushing at the door or banging on the door to like complete either of those trades because as much as I like Walker Kessler, unless you can just get him for a very good deal on a good contract, I just don't know if it's worth it. But then again, I'm not crying if we get a Walker Kessler. So, like I said, I just think like people need to keep in mind that it's very possible that just because guys that are on contracts already doesn't mean they're not going to be traded. That just means it's more likely they could be traded. I mean, then people make the argument for Obi Toppin because he's got a tradable contract. Well, Nimhard's the same way. He's got 18 million for a year for the next 3 years. That is a very favorable contract that most teams are going to want, and a guy with who they may perceive as could be a starting point guard for their team. And I think the Jazz could still use that because I think Keontae is more of a shooting guard in my opinion. But he hasn't improved a lot on the passing front this year, so I could see them being talked into that kind of backcourt. So that's my spiel on Walker Kessler. Very intrigued by the possibility of getting him, only if it's for the right trade. And of course, I'm not going to bring up our pick for this coming draft because that's obviously off limits in any trade talks, in my opinion. I mean, I don't care who you're trading for. Unless you're getting like a Giannis or some superstar level guy, you're not trading that pick. So, after that spiel too, let me get into the Daniel Gafford situation. And this one really intrigued me because it's from a more credible source. So the other source that reported on the Walker Kessler, I think, was just from some writer from that works for the Jazz who's just heard from other people in the organization and whatnot that we've been interested since the summer in Walker Kessler. And I don't doubt that we haven't been. But I trust the source way more on the Daniel Gafford front. And that's coming from Jake Fisher, who reported that we're interested in Daniel Gafford. And it makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, a ton of sense because he's going to be he got extended, so he'll end up making like 18 to 20 million a year, which isn't bad for a starting level center. He's 27. Well, I don't know if he turns 28 during this season or not, so he fits our timeline, I would say, and a guy that we can have on a longer contract for the next 3 to 4 years, who I think would fit this team very well, actually, in terms of especially what we need right now. And so this first trade that I cooked up for Daniel Gafford, so I've got multiple ones for him as well, and even some more like, let's say, more comprehensive ones that maybe we can get a little bit more out of Dallas if they're open to it. But this first trade I have is Daniel Gafford for Obi Toppin and a Utah second-round pick in 2027 and a 2028 second-round pick Dallas. They get their second-round pick back. Or maybe you take out one of those and it wouldn't take that much. I don't know what they would be looking for in a Gafford trade. That's why I just included those picks. Maybe they don't need the picks at all. You just throw in, I don't know. But like, I just said this trade because Obi Toppin and Daniel Gafford have almost the exact same contract. So it's literally just that clean of a trade. And then maybe you throw a little extra incentive to get it done. Would it hurt losing Obi Toppin? For sure. It would hurt. But then again, let me place this caveat. So we bring in Daniel Gafford, trade Obi Toppin. Yes, his impact would be missed, but if we get a top 4 to 5 pick in this draft, there's a lot of players that are in this draft that play the power forward position. So if we get like let's say a top 3 pick and we get Cam Boozer, or we get Caleb Wilson, or we get that Koa Pete from Arizona, those are all very good high-level fours that could literally just like slot right into that Obi Toppin role, especially if we want to bring the guy off the bench slowly, kind of like what the Spurs are doing with Dylan Harper this year, where they don't have a ton of pressure to like exceed expectations, but they can come in, contribute to a winning team. And that's what I envision when we get a top pick. So it would soften the blow on that front because you're going to get a guy that's going to have huge potential possibly that you want to play and develop, and possibly Obi Toppin would get in the way. And we learned that with the Jarris Walker thing where, yes, Obi has been phenomenal. He's a great person too. I would hate to trade him, but when you got that talented of a player that's a top 3 to 4 pick, you can make the sacrifice. So that's my argument for it too. And then you had the money to re-sign Mathurin. You bring back the squad with the top 3 to 4 pick from the draft. I mean, so a lineup of like Halliburton, Nimhard. I'm gonna start Matherin in this scenario, but Neesmith, possibly whoever you prefer, I guess. Siakam, and then Daniel Gafford. And that's not a bad lineup at all. And that actually gives us a lob threat for the first time in 10 plus years. Yeah, I know Gafford can't shoot from three, but he's literally a better rebounder than Miles. He's just as good of a shot blocker, I would say, and paint like presence. And he's a better rebounder, like I said, offensive rebounder, a better finisher by far. He shoots like 70% from the field in his career. And he's just a way more athletic player. I like a lot of the aspects that Daniel Gafford could bring. And I'm actually wanting to get into some advanced stats on both these guys after I kind of cover these trade scenarios because I think they're very fascinating. But I think he would really help turn our paint defense around, especially this year and then moving forward. But then another trade scenario I created was Daniel Gafford and Max Christie for Obi Toppin and Jarris Walker. And I don't know if the Mavs do that. So I don't know if they're like interested in trading Max Christie because he fits their timeline, but maybe they would be open to Jarris and thinking he's a guy that could be in a position that they need, I would say. I don't know. Maybe throw in a couple extra picks or even a future first. I don't know. Maybe not a future first. That's a lot. But maybe a couple second rounders to sweeten the pot a little. But if they were open to that, I would pull the trigger on that. And I like Max Christie. He could fill in the Jarris Walker spot. He's 6'6". He's been lights out from three this year, over a 40% three-point shooter. And I think he's got a lot of potential. And I think it makes other guys like Shepherd more expendable. And I don't want to say Neesmith because I hope he's on the team for a long time too. But it allows more flexibility in the wing spots. Let's just say that. So I like that. If you could do that, I don't know if the Mavs would be into that. And then I did another extended trade where it was Daniel Gafford, Max Christie, and Dwight Powell, who's on the last year of his deal, for Obi Toppin, Jarris Walker, and Ben Shepherd. So this would clear even more room for Max Christie to get playing time. He could literally just slot in and take the minutes from Shepherd and Walker. And then obviously we get Gafford, our starting center, Obi Toppin, and like I said earlier, the same idea applies here with Obi in each of these trades is that we're going to bring in a power forward possibly with a top pick. So that's why you're kind of okay with letting him go. And maybe the Mavericks see like, oh, these guys have proven to be shooters, Obi, Jarris, and Shepherd somewhat. So if they could add 3 shooters and get rid of just Max Christie and a Daniel Gafford, and then who they don't really need, I would say. Maybe they need Max Christie more than that, and then you just let go of Dwight Powell at the end of the year, or you just tell him not to show up to the team. However you want to say that, but that's just an expiring contract to get the salaries to match. I thought that was intriguing. I would actually do that too because from what we've seen from Jarris and Shepherd this year, not really thoroughly impressed, and I think Max Christie is better than both of them. But the way Dallas is in this transition, maybe they want to lose more and they'll take a gamble more on guys that maybe fit other needs that they could see would be a better fit for their team possibly. Or maybe they just love Max Christie and he's not going to get traded. But that's me. This is like wishful thinking when I'm including Max Christie in these trades because I just think it would be kind of a cool get. And then I did the same trade too, but included Brandon Williams instead of Dwight Powell, which doesn't really matter. So I thought those were very interesting trades. And another one that I'm going to say, so Fanspo wouldn't let me complete it because he can't be traded just yet. So like I brought up earlier with Isaiah Jackson, he's allowed to be traded on December 15th because we just re-signed him, of course, so you had to wait a certain period of time so he could be traded. So that's where I say, like, don't expect a trade before that time because I think the team is going to want to use his salary in a trade. So if you just trade, like once he's able to be traded, if you trade Isaiah Jackson and Jarris Walker straight up for Daniel Gafford, the money works. So if you can get rid of those guys and match the salaries, they get a promising, I guess, young prospect and Walker. If they want to take a rebuilding route, they already have plenty of centers on the team. Maybe you throw them Tony Bradley too, if they just want somebody else. I mean, they got Jackson, so they're getting another center back who's young. They could try to develop, and then obviously Jarris too. I don't see why the Mavs would say no. Maybe throw in like their own second round pick in 2028. They can get that back if they want. and maybe you got a deal there. And I think that would make the most sense of any trade that I've talked about today. I think that would be my number one trade that I would look to do if I'm the front office is Isaiah Jackson, Jarris Walker, maybe a second round pick for Daniel Gafford. That means you can re-sign Matherin. You get a starting level center who would have a huge impact on this team's defense, even more so than what Jay Huff's done, who would just be a player that would play his role. And that's what I wanted to kind of talk about between the Walker Kessler and Daniel Gafford argument. So yeah, I know Daniel Gafford is not the sexiest name compared to Walker Kessler, but Gafford would play the role perfectly. He would fill in as just that fifth starter on the offensive end, but yet help be the anchor of a defense, especially inside. On the defensive end, I mean, that would be the perfect world because you got to have some order of an hierarchy within a lineup. You don't want all these guys that are just expected to get shots, kind of like what we had last year, which I know it worked with Miles, I guess, because we made the finals. But I just felt a lot of times like he just would force shots just so he can get his points because that's what he cared about the most. So it would be nice to see that getting a guy like Gafford who's going to set hard screens, that's something Miles never done, who's going to roll to the rim, actually be able to catch lobs, something Miles could never do, and who's going to have a hard nose for rebounds, something Miles didn't do. And he's just a completely different player than Miles. The only thing Miles has on him is maybe an extra zero point 0.4 blocks per game and then being able to shoot from three. But rim running wise, defensive presence inside wise, I think he's just as good as Miles, if not better. And then it just adds a new element. It adds a new element to this team that we haven't had, and that Halliburton hasn't had, quite frankly, because imagine a guy that he could just throw a lob to if they try to overcommit on Halliburton or dump it off to who's finishing 70% inside for his career. I mean, that's insane shooting from the field. And yes, I get like it's all dunks or just layups inside, but that's what we want. We want a guy that's not going to venture outside of what he's capable of. We want a guy that's just going to play his role. And that's what I love about the idea of Gafford. He's going to play his role, what we need from him. And like a Walker Kessler, maybe he's going to want to get more shots up. Maybe he's going to want to be a top 3 option or something. And I just really like the idea of a lineup of Halliburton, Nembhard, Matherin, Siakam, and Gafford. And then you just got such a strong bench with Toppin, TJ, Neesmith, a top 3 to 4 pick. You still got Shepard. Other guys we have on this team, that Murphy, I just really like the idea of that and the sound of that. And I think it would be just the perfect trade scenario if we could do Jackson and Walker for Gafford and maybe like their own second round pick in 28. So to me, that's the number one trade I would do because you fill that starting role and you can still retain Matherin and kind of bring the same team back. And you'll have Jay Huff as a backup center, which would be huge too because it adds that different dynamic. Like Jay Huff and Daniel Gafford are completely different types of players. Gafford's more of a rebounder, crashes offensive glass, finisher inside, more athletic, more athletic. He can catch lobs more, better screener. But then Huff would bring that other side where you're not sacrificing rim defense as much. He's a high level shot blocker, Huff is. So you're still going to have constant rim protection pretty much the entire game between those two. But then Huff brings that element of being able to shoot threes. So it's matchup dependent wise. If you have a lot more versatility in that front too, which I love that idea as well. So I thought that would be probably the best trade. And I think it's very telling if we do trade for a Daniel Gafford because I think that just shows that the front office is wanting to re-sign Matherin. Because if we trade for a Walker Kessler, let's say, then I think more so than not, we're not going to try to bring Matherin back. So I think it's going to tell a lot if we do trade for Daniel Gafford. And if that's the case, I think we're going to try everything we can just to bring Matherin back and roll with that team, plus add a future pick, which their salary is going to affect the cap too. So we're definitely going to be paying the luxury tax. So got to keep an eye on that, but maybe the team's willing to do that, especially if we think we're that close to a championship with that kind of core. So very interesting stuff to me. And I wanted to get into, like I said, some advanced numbers to kind of show you guys the impact these guys could have on the team. So far this year, Daniel Gafford, his on and off numbers, so compared to when he's on the court and when he's off, he he's been a winning player essentially his entire career. He's only had 2 years where he had a negative impact in terms of differential, so where he didn't help the team win pretty much. But the rest of his career, he has. Like this year, he has so far, he's added like expected wins of like a +3, so he's having a very positive impact on the team, and the team wins their minutes when he's out there. And the biggest part of that is the defensive end. And they're giving up a lot less points when Gafford's on the floor. They're allowing teams to shoot a less percentage from the field when he's on the floor. Teams are getting less offensive rebounds, and they're getting less free throws when Daniel Gafford's on the floor. And as we know, with our team, we need somebody that's going to limit opponents' offensive rebounds because we've been killed this year on that, and somebody that can protect the paint the way Gafford does that helps boost our defense even more, but also isn't going to command the ball too much on offense. And that's why I think he would be such a perfect fit because everything we need on the defensive end from a big, he provides. And I'm just going off the advanced stats here from Cleaning the Glass. One that's pretty credible, pretty much all the big names use. So if you can add a guy like that, and like I said, we have a terrible defense in the paint right now. Teams just score at will inside, and he would help that tremendously. And that's why I'm just so intrigued by this move, because I think it's a very under the radar move that could still help propel us to a championship. And as we've seen already too, Gafford, he has played in the NBA Finals. He's been a part of a NBA Finals team. He was literally the starter all the way till the finals. So I mean, when you got a guy like with that experience already that's proven that he can be that level of player at that level, even if he struggled in the finals, I mean, and his life's going to be so much easier on our team playing next to Tyrese. We saw what Tyrese did with Miles Turner. I mean, how much of a better player he made Miles Turner than what he actually is. He literally got Miles paid this year, and then Miles tries to talk down on Tyrese, which is crazy because Miles is heavily overpaid right now. It's looking real bad. We're looking good on that front, not paying Miles Turner. I'm just going to go ahead and say that 100%. It was a right move. We honestly got lucky that the Bucks did that, and I'm very glad for it. Kind of like I don't want to say this in a bad way, but kind of like the Oladipo thing, where we got lucky where he didn't accept that contract extension. It's kind of playing the same way, I would say, with the Miles Turner extension. So I think we lucked out. But overall, Gafford's advanced metrics very much lean towards he's going to have a huge impact on the defensive end. And Walker Kessler, of course, I'm going to go off last year's numbers because he only played 5 games this year before he got hurt. But he really helped the team's offensive rebounding last year, which they were in like the 93 or 93rd percentile in that. So he would help our team tremendously on the offensive glass. And defensively, he definitely helped the team out on defensive end. The team was better on defense with him out there. Their teams were shooting less from the field when he was out there. He heavily limited offensive rebounds and the free throw rate. Like teams were just shooting astronomically lower from the free throw line. So both of those guys would be kind of just exactly what we need from a big man position. It's just it gets a little complicated with the trades discussions, like what would be included, what would not be included. It gets a little dicey from there. So that's where I think why I could see us having more interest in Daniel Gafford, because if he can be more gettable on a cheaper deal, possibly, because you don't know what Walker's going to command, and especially what compensation they're going to want for Walker. Maybe it's less now because of the injury, but I know before they were asking a lot, or else he would have been traded already, I think. So, and maybe they just want to keep Walker Kessler. You don't know with this Jazz team. So, maybe he's not even on the table. But we know Daniel Gafford is definitely gettable. And I think he would fit this team like a glove. I really do. And if that's all we had to really give up was like Jackson and Walker and maybe a second-round pick, I think he'd do that 9 times out of 10. And you still have a lot of your depth. You still have your pick. You can bring back Matherin, who's shown that he's a bona fide second or third option this year. I don't think there's really an argument for that, and I think we're seeing how crucial his offense is this year, especially the fact that he's proven to be such a better shooter this year so far, where he's been a good spot-up shooter. I think that's proven he can fit alongside Tyrese and all them in the lineup. So that's really what I wanted to cover today, Pacer Nation. I'm sorry if I had a long-winded answer to some of these, but I thought it was very interesting to go through. like actual trade scenarios to kind of give you guys an idea of what it would take to land these guys. That's kind of in the rumor mill right now, and then just some of their impact on winning because they're both winning players according to their advanced metrics for on and off numbers, and especially Gafford. You'd be surprised, but he actually is very much a winning player, and the advanced numbers prove that. So either way, guys, it's going to be interesting. I would say like in the next few weeks, maybe something happens. If not, obviously before the trade deadline, I do think they're going to end up trading for a center, and I think they're waiting till Jackson can be included in trades because I think that's going to be the next domino that needs to fall before we really seriously trade for anybody. So keep an eye on that. Like I said, December 15th, he should be eligible for trades, and maybe that's when maybe we pull the trigger sooner rather than later. I don't know. If we're still trying to win, I don't know either. You just don't know what direction we're really going, and I think it's going to tell a lot once we do trade for said center, whether it's Walker Kessler or Daniel Gafford or maybe somebody else entirely. Zubac, Flaxen, who knows? But very interesting, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will talk to you soon, Pacer Nation.